Then we go to share screen. And I'm going to pin myself. Okay, so welcome to Chigiri-e and Collage and Illumination in Japanese literature. I discovered this, it was about 2 years ago, and I'm fairly new to the SCA. I've only been here 3 years. And I discovered this when I was looking for a way to look at scribal work in Japan. And my drawing isn't as good as I thought it would be. And this, to me, seemed like a very accessible and creative way of creating scribal works. Okay. So when we're talking about this period in Japan, we're talking about the Heian period, known as the floating world for between the 894 and 1184 CE. This is a period dominated by the power of the imperial court in Kyoto and saw a rise in the arts and literature. So we saw not just a rise in the arts, but a way to actually make those arts less influenced by Chinese culture and to more make them distinctly Japanese, really, about the land, as well as a development of the Japanese language. For what we have in terms of text, and we're going to talk a little bit about the various texts and script in this presentation, because we have kanji, which is derived from Chinese language. But what this period saw was the development of kana. And this was a way of transcribing Japanese words into text, the actual Japanese language. And then we have the development of hiragana, which is primarily for Japanese words, as well as katakana, which is for foreign words. And a lot of these foreign words started out with being Chinese words that were transcribed phonetically. But also, as we got into much later, when the Europeans started arriving, it started to have European words. Just recall that kanji is a pictographic language, which the characters represent more individual words or ideas, concepts, whereas kana is slightly more phonetic, with the characters being combined to make up words. What we have with a flowing form of kana was used for literature, developed by women poets, authors, and artists. And this text way of writing the characters was a lot more natural and artistic compared to kanji, which was quite formulaic and had a very well standardized form, really. So when we get into the actual text types, we can actually see these differences in how the characters were written, and the different ones. So at the top we have the religious document, that's actually a sutra. And as you can see, the kanji is written all in nice little rows in it, like a grid. And this is following on from the Chinese tradition. Below that, we have what I call story documents. These are the emaki scrolls, which some scrolls, such as sorry, my brain is weird today. The story of Genji is sort of one of them, but Genji fits also into a few different categories. And also story scrolls were very often illustrated with actual pictures, whereas we're talking about with Chigiri-e, something slightly different in terms of aesthetics. Below that, we have official documents, again, very similar to the sutra, which is at the top. All the characters are in neat rows. Everything is quite formulaic and standard. And on the right, we have a Chigiri-e poetry document. And you can see the difference between the way the characters are formed, not just the characters themselves, but the way the characters are formed and how some of them run into each other. Some of them have the little long tails, and there is generally a lot more freer movement and a flowing movement compared to the other documents there. Also, the picture, if you notice, is quite different. We're going to be a bit more stylistic. We're going to be a little bit more abstract compared to, say, the Amaki scrolls, the religious scrolls, which are a little bit more towards realism, really. We're still with our own stylistic elements, but we have a sliding scale between realism and stylism. And Chigiri-e goes more towards the stylism. So what I'm going to do is divine a Chigiri-e piece, because it is a sort of an umbrella term, because there are things that make up a Chigiri-e piece. These might not all be on the one piece, and sometimes it's an either or. So the first one is the use of kana rather than kanji. And as you can see from the one on the left, for those who can read Japanese, you can see that there is kana there. Next we have the onade calligraphy style. Onade is the women's writing, which was developed by these women poets and artists. This is a distinctive style with a Chigiri-e piece. The last one is possibly the most striking difference, is we have a mixed media decoration, which is a modern term that I'm using here because we have several media used to create a Chigiri-e piece. We have ink, paint, torn and cut paper. We have marbling and the use of mica, gold and silver. And this is where I actually call it illumination, because we have the use of metallics. It does fit into the category of illumination. Okay, so I'm going to look at a few Chigiri-e pieces, and this is actually one of my favorites. It's from a very famous collection. And what we have here is sort of a pattern paper on the outside and a torn piece of paper in the middle, with painting, with some gold used in the little dots of mica. And we have our flowing on the deck kana being used. And one thing you might notice different to, say, the official document and the sutra is the kana it's distributed seemingly without pattern or form here, but it's probably a very deliberate choice in how the kana is put on the page. One thing I've liked about this is that use of negative space, really, with the use of the torn paper, because you have that, this is an early Japanese aesthetic that you see quite in a lot of modern art and graphic design. But here you have it represented. It's from the 11th century, I believe this piece is in. And in addition to the kana, we also have some painting for the green of the bamboo around the boat. That's painting with paint and ink, as well as some little paintings of birds around the outside and boat to show the boats and waves. These little paintings are something that you see in quite a few different Chigiri-e pieces. Am I going too fast for people?
No, all good.
Okay. So I'm just going to look at our next piece. This is what I call the more abstract patchwork piece, similar to the patchwork garments you'll find. What we have here is some torn paper, which has been outlined in the silver, as you can see, as well as some painting that has been done in a silver, as well as in a pale, or in ink as well. The kana here is a lot more evenly distributed, but this is actually to show the several lines and stanzas of a poem. But as again, you can see that it's free flowing. A lot of the characters are connected. And over it, you can see a little bit of the gilding, the mica, as well as a little bits of gold leaf. Those tiny little squares you can see. The gold leaf that has been put on a piece. I've got some more examples of the painting, a decorative painting you can see on the one on the left, and the one on the right has a lot more examples of the gold leaf and gilding, really. Quite a lot of gold leaf used here in little clumps to give it a lovely sparkle, really. Again, the kana is a lot more evenly distributed on the page, but there isn't the same sort of consistency that you would find with, say, a sutra or an official document. Lastly, this piece, I believe it's from the Kale of the Genji. And this is actually one of the earliest example of marbling. And from what you can see, it is actually very similar to modern marbling. So to recreate this, to begin with, you can use modern inks if you know how to do marbling, which a lot of people might have done actually in school, or if they went to art classes or something. But again, we also see they have come back and done a little bit of the metallic work, as well as the painting. You can see on the far right, I can't really, if you can see my mouse here, there is on the far right, you can see that has been some deliberate painting in a pale white. And again, this is actually the double pages of a poetry book. So the characters are a lot more evenly distributed, even though they are still keeping with the flowing kana of on the deck. And if you look, if you know the difference between your kana and your kanji, you can actually see kanji is being used for official things such as names of people and numbers. I believe I can identify a few numbers here. But that is in the minority compared to the kana that is being used. Okay, so these are my own works that I've recreated for Kingdom Arts and Sciences competitions here in Lockhart. The one on the left was my first entry. It was not my first attempt. I went back and redid the entire thing. It's not bad. It did win the prize. And here I was trying to, was doing a famous poem from the 100 Poets, One Poem Each collection, which I'll talk about later. And I can actually read this to you. It says, on this journey, I have no sorry. This poem is the right one. Such beauty unheard of, even in the age of raging gods, the Tatsuta River, tie-dyeing its waters in autumnal colors. And as you can see with the picture, I try to recreate the river and the maple leaves in the river. And I wasn't very creative with how I placed my kana, really. I think if I did this again, I would not have it in columns like this. I would be a bit more creative with what I did. And also, in terms of materials, you see that how I wrote, what I used to write the characters is very different, whereas the one on the left, I used a felt tip calligraphy pen. The one on the right, I used a brush tip calligraphy pen, and you can see that this one, I think it looks much nicer. Now, the one on the right, I'm going to be entering this into a contest later because the event that it was supposed to go to is cancelled. I'm going to talk to this in more detail a little bit later, but I tried to have some variation in what I put the characters. I was trying to be a bit better in how I blended the paper on the page. There are actually a few joins here, not just a straight line. There is actually a join towards the top right corner where I combined several pieces of paper, but the join I think is a lot better. I'd also looked at a lot more of these since then, and I did some gilding of the outside edge of the blue. And I used the mica as well as some metallic pieces here. So these are the materials that I used, really. You need washi paper of different weights. I recommend the mulberry kozo paper. You really can't substitute this because of the way the paper behaves and its absorbency and the way it adheres to the page so well. The glue you need, I started using an old PVA school glue, the kind that you would use just in a craft class or art class. I believe it's called Elmer's glue in the US. And the reason is you do need to dilute the glue a bit to get that right. For the to use it for using it. One thing you can also do is you can make your own rice paste glue, which is a lot more close to period. There are quite a few recipes online. The only thing is it does tend to go moldy, so you do need to keep it in the fridge and you do need to use it quite quickly. I do intend to move on to rice paste glue, but I'm quite busy right now and I have quite a few bottles of PVA glue around the house. Next thing I also use is mica powder. You can get this at shops that sell candle soap supplies, makeup supplies, cosmetic supplies. You can get it quite cheaply, actually. Do be prepared, though, it does go absolutely everywhere. So I suggest doing it outside, wearing clothes. You don't mind being bedazzled, and put it in a box and be very, very sparing when you use it. And also use metallic paper. And I found the easiest one to get is metallic origami paper, because it is actually quite thin and it's very easy to get and cheap. Last thing you need is some heavy weights, such as some heavy books or things, because you're making the paper quite wet and it will warp. So before you actually have your final product, you will need to weigh it down before you can present it properly, really. Yeah, I will talk a bit about paper suppliers later on, because I found a very good supplier to get the right sort of thing in the right colors. So before you begin to create your Chigiri-e piece, you should find a poem that inspires you to create a piece, because this is actually what people did. They would go to a poetry anthology and they would find a poem that they liked that would touch them in a very deep way. And they would create a piece to make these lovely pieces. I have included a few collections of poems on here. A lot of these are actually available online in English, as well as in Japanese and in Romaji, Romanized Japanese, which I thought was quite necessary to recreate the kana, because I am very much beginner Japanese, but if I sit down with my Romaji poem and a kana chart, including a stroke chart, I can actually do something that I think is possible, really, at least recognizable as Japanese. Though I'm not going to teach you how to do calligraphy here today, because that is an art taught by masters. And if you'd like to do more by calligraphy, I suggest you go and find a calligraphy master. The poems I've used mostly are the Ogara Hayakinushu, the 100 poets, one poem each. And then there's a very famous collection of poems. And Penguin actually have a copy that is very good, which is in English as well as in Romaji. So the blue scroll on the right, actually, I call that the bamboo cutter scroll. And I'm going to take you through my steps of creating it. Because what I did is I found familiar with the story, The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. I found what is possibly one of the first English translations of the entire story. It's a very famous story, quite old. And it has a lot of poetry in it, where we have characters. They would compose stanzas of poetry to each other to express emotion. And I also, this version I had, also has the entire text in Romaji. So I transcribed the Romaji text to use of the poem in my scroll. And this is the final poem right at the end of the story. And if you're familiar with the story, this is the one the emperor sends to the main character, Princess Kaguya. And he sends it by burning an elixir of life and in the fire on top of Mount Fuji. And he puts the poem into the flames, hoping that the smoke will get the poem back to her in heaven on the moon, where she now lives after she left the earth. I encourage you to look up the story, by the way, and it was actually made into a film, though some elements, including this part, were regretfully left out. The poem is Aokoto mo namira ni ukabu wagi mina wa shinanu kusuri wa nani ni ka wasimu. Never more to see her. Tears of grief overwhelm me. And as for me, with the elixir of life, what have I to do? Now, I wanted to recreate the effect of this image of the poem going up to heaven. So that's what I did here. I didn't want to completely cover the scroll, because I also wanted to use a thing of negative space. So I wanted to recreate the sky, the clouds, and the smoke. So my blue paper here, as you can see, when I was planning out my scroll, my blue paper was going to be the sky. The white space on my backing paper was going to represent the clouds, as well as the snow of Mount Fuji, where the fire is being lit. And this cream-colored paper is used to represent the smoke going up to heaven. And so after planning, I took a photo and then I glued it over the paper. And as you can see, I have gone over the line of the page, And this is deliberate. It's to show that so you get a lovely clean cut at the edge of your page rather than trying to match up the edges. After the glue is dry, it takes about a day or overnight for the glue to fully dry, and you must have it fully dry between stages. I applied the gilding on the edges. I have some gold and silver calligraphy brush pens to get that nice edge. Also, one thing I was debating about the gluing, the reason you need to have the glue quite runny, diluted, is you basically need to completely saturate the paper. I would normally have a little bowl of water with the glue in it next to me, and I would either completely immerse pieces in the water, or I would have a sponge. I use cut up kitchen sponges, and gently use that to get the paper to stick down and to blend with the page you're putting it on. Also, it is worth going back at a later stage if the paper does lift a bit, because sometimes it does, and just to do a full coating to get it to stay down there. And this method is also what you do to apply the gold paper and the mica. With the mica, I actually put the entire page in a cardboard box. This is an old trick I use with spray painting. So your mica is mostly contained, but you will actually still get it on you. I have my mica in a little sealable bag, refillable bag. And what I do is I get a dry paintbrush. It has to be dry, dip it in, and then just wave the brush over the page. And it does bring out the mica, even though you can't see it. So if you don't think you're getting it on there, probably shine a light inside your box. And after that, the page is ready for your calligraphy, which is here. So as you can see, I did try to combine characters a little bit, but I am very much still learning, really. I also had a bit of made a bit of a style, a design decision in how I placed it on the page, because I wanted it to look like the words were ascending to the sky with the smoke, really. And the long tails of the kana actually do also give that effect. And this is this text I did after quite a bit of practice, because first I just write it out, because you want to see which characters will look good long, particularly. There's quite a lot of ones with long tails here. Also, once you get it on the page, you want to get it right. You don't want to make a mistake here. And also be very careful of smudges. There is a very good way to hold the calligraphy brush, which is very different from how you would hold a pen. You do need to have your brush almost vertical in your hand. This helps with your free flowing of movement, but it also stops smudges. If you can see on the bottom left, there is a little smudge there, which I really couldn't do anything about, so I decided to embrace it. That's a bit of my creation. Okay, so these are my references. And the last one, it can be quite difficult to find period resources on this. I do recommend the last two, even though they are from the 70s, but I found that those books have the best examples of technique and of the various history of things. But you might need to find them at a specialist library. You can find them online. The last one, the Origami Factory, is where I got my paper. And if you go to that website, you can actually find that they have stockists over the entire world. So you can order online directly from them, or find one in your local city that will deliver to you. And I just happened to find them because I was at a Japanese art exhibit, and they had these great big packets of paper. Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can show you a few things. Okay. These are my glues. One of them is an Elmer's glue. This is a good way to get started. This is also a good way to do it with kids. Because these are easy glues. This is my the Origami Factory. You can see, not sure if you saw that in there. A lot of the paper does have threads in it. You can see that. Can't really see that here. Yeah, if you're familiar with Japanese paper, it doesn't crease well, and this floppiness actually is one of the things that gives it the properties so well. This is also my copy of 100 Poets, One Poem Each from Penguin. Should be fairly easy to find, and Penguin do very good translations. And lastly, these are two pieces actually I have created in the last few days. I'm going to be doing an exhibit at My Kingdom's Rowaney Festival, and this is one I'm doing with autumn leaves, because we're coming into autumn in Australia. So this is the autumn leaves going for the mountain. I'm told it also looks like a campfire. And this one is one I'm working on at the moment. But it does a bit more of the crazy sort of patchwork thing. I think I went a bit too overboard with this, but I'm still very much experimenting and being creative. And right. So I think I'll stop the recording now.